Met fans, welcome back to another edition of the Terry Collins Show, presented by Tunnel to Tower, supporting America's greatest heroes. Donate just $11 per month by going to T2T.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org. I'm John Arezzi. Terry Collins will be joining us later in this episode as we do a deep dive into the month of April 2015, the 10-year anniversary of the Mets team TC managed, which made it all the way to the World Series. So TC will be joining us with that. And first, as Terry knows, I'm a lifelong Mets fan. Goes all the way back to when I was just 9 years old. And during the season, I'm going to be interviewing some of the amazing legends of the New York Mets. Earlier this week, I had the honor to talk to the man who made what is arguably the greatest catch in the history of the World Series. The catch, which took place in Game 4 of the 1969 World Series, was caught by Ron Swoboda, a man who was truly one of the Mets' early legends. So let's go to that conversation with one of my boyhood heroes, Ron Swoboda, right now. I'm so excited about this amazing then, amazing now interview. Throughout my close to 60 years as a Mets fan, our guest was one of my all-time favorites. Along with Eddie Kranepool, he was my Mets hero, especially during the 1969 miracle season when he made what is simply now called the catch in the 1969 World Series, a catch which many consider the best in World Series history. He will forever be remembered as a member of that World Championship team. He's a longtime broadcaster, author of Here's the Catch, a memoir of those amazing Mets, and I have my copy right here. It is an honor to welcome Ron Swoboda to the Terry Collins Show. Ron, welcome. Appreciate it.
Nice to be there. Nice to be anywhere at my age. Actually, nice to be seen as opposed to being viewed.
Well, you're 80
You know what
now,
I mean?
right? You're 80?
And
Are you 80 years
I'll
old?
be 81 this June 30. My wife and I are in our 81st year. We'll have 59 years of marriage at the end of this this calendar year. So we're feeling pretty fortunate about all of that.
So you've been married 59 years.
We will be at
That's
the end of
amazing.
this year. Yeah. So, I've been very fortunate.
Yeah.
Cecilia is, the mother of my two children and the best person I know on this planet, period.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I want to preface all of this with my
Wonderful to be able to say it without a gun on you.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I guess it is. I'm going to preface this all with my fandom. I went to my very first game. It was July 3rd, 1966. It was a hot, hot day. My Uncle Sonny, my Uncle Anthony, my godfather asked me if I wanted to go see a baseball game, and he was a diehard Yankee fan, but the Yankees were on the road. So he took me to Shea Stadium, and if he would have taken me to a Yankee game, who knows where I'd be. But on that day, July 3rd, 1966, a doubleheader against the Pittsburgh Pirates, Eddie Kranepool had a great doubleheader, and that was my first chance to see both you and Eddie play. You played in one of the two games. You were hitless. Eddie had a 3-for-3 game or whatever. So I have to say I became an Eddie Kranepool fan, and you were a close number two, because what I remembered as a 9-year-old, and this was 3 weeks before I went to Shea Stadium again to see the Beatles. So it was my first experience at Shea. I remember as a 9-year-old how the fans loved you. I mean, with every at bat, with every plate appearance, and I was drawn to that, and it hooked me. And then it was just kind of like I was in, and I've been in it for life ever since. That, and I have to say that you were such an influence on my life, and my next door neighbors, the Gallaghers. Michael Gallagher was probably the biggest Ron Swoboda fan. So we lived right next door to each other. He'd wear a uniform with number 4. I'd have one with number 7.
Well,
And you
you
were our
know,
guy.
as as we've gone down the road a good bit, it's become more of a thrill for me to meet people that said, "Good God, man, you were so much fun to watch. You gave me moments I cannot forget." And for a guy who was really in every way an average major league player, which ain't the worst thing can happen to you, by the way. I felt like what a privilege to be in that position. I was just trying to play baseball. I was just trying to stick around and do something productive and be a part of the thing, because if you played poorly back in those, days of 1 year contract, you could be in the minor leagues, you could be out the door. And so it was very much of a scuffle for existence. But at the same time, there was this whole other thing going on with the fans that I have come to appreciate all the more as I've gotten older.
Yeah. Yeah, as I was doing research
And
for this, even though I do know a lot about your career, I learned something, and it was like the day after the first game I went to. You guys went to Philadelphia, July 4th, for the 4th of July, and I read that you hit a ball onto the left field roof against the Phillies at Connie Mack Stadium. So, and I think before we went on there, you said, "I think I remember that."
Yeah, well, Connie Mack was iconic as one of the old ballparks. I mean, you think of Connie Mack as the manager who wore a suit in the dugout. I don't think he
Yes.
wore a uniform, and of course he wasn't around then. It was Gene Mock who was who was managing the Phillies back then, and I got to play against them, and Rick Wise was a pretty good right-handed pitcher, pretty good fastball, good breaking ball, as I recall, and I just somehow caught up with one. And there you didn't have to hit it that far. If you got it up in the air, you didn't have to hit it that far to get on the roof there. Dick Allen, most of the home runs Dick Allen hit for the Phillies were on the roof if he in old Connie Mack. But it was an incredible old ballpark, and I had a lot of memories there. My dad would come up occasionally from Baltimore and watch me play, and so it was gettable for him, a
Hmm.
little closer than Shea Stadium in New York.
Wow. And those old ballparks, I mean, uh, it must have been so special, because you were telling me also that you even had gone to a game at Ebbets Field once, and that was kind of
I
magical for you.
did. I grew up in Baltimore, and our Memorial Stadium was our old ballpark, and
Yeah.
it was a sort of concrete thing, the grandstands, and you went into Ebbets Field, and it was all steel beams and open, and the energy in the place was unreal. Once you got inside, you started hearing the bands playing and the people cheering, and they got stirred up early there in Ebbets Field. And then you walked up through, we sat in the lower stands down the right field line, right behind the big pillar, by the way. But those were the tickets we had for the first game of the doubleheader. And here's what I can't tell you. I can't tell you what exact year it was. I can't. All I know is, the Dodgers were playing somebody in red. It could have been the Phillies, could have been Cincinnati. All I know is I'm in a big league ballpark that is unlike anything I've ever seen. The characters in the place, the just the energy, as I said, unbelievable.
Were you kind of fantasizing back then in those early days about, wow, it would be
No,
kind of cool to have a baseball
no,
career? It wasn't even
no,
in your that wasn't even your
no.
purview at the time.
It was a dream that was too far away to dream. I mean, I played baseball as a kid. I was playing it then. I was probably 11 or 12, and big Oriole fan. And
Mhm.
I used to play down the street from where I lived in Sparrows Point, was near the steel mill, right? And the street that I lived on, occasionally they would tar it and lay gravel on top of the tar. And that was the substance of the roadbed, right? And you could get these nice little rocks that my mother kept wondering why her broom handles were disappearing, because I'd be sawing off her broom and I'd be over there throwing these rocks up and hitting them with a broom handle into a field across the street. And, you had a distance for a single, you had a distance for a double, you had a triple. And then in the woods way out there was a home run. And of course, you saved all the really quality nuggets for your favorite players, like Brooks Robinson. Oddly enough, when Brooks Robinson came up to the Orioles, he was the guy that caught your attention. He was young. He was exciting at third base. He failed his first try and then went back to the minor leagues and then came back up and never left. And so I had that sort of kid's relationship with Brooks Robinson. The irony that he would be on the other end of the greatest play I ever made in my career is too astounding to even think about.
That's amazing. Yeah, how that intertwined with what happened in '69 was crazy. But the Dodgers eventually left Brooklyn. New York was without a National League team, as the Giants left as well. And then in 1962, the New York Mets expansion team comes into fruition, and
we come into being to replace those two teams. They, of course, incorporated all parts of the Dodgers writing script across the chest. The Mets is written in script. The orange is Giants orange. The NY is the Giants NY. So many pieces of those teams. The pinstripes. Most people don't even talk about our home uniforms were pinstripes. Neither the Dodgers or Giants had pinstripes. But the Yankees did. So we were an amalgamation of all three teams that once played in New York. But the whole idea, it was always for me because of that connection to the Dodgers and the Giants. And I would ask anyone listening to this, if you want to read about that whole evolution of the Giants and Dodgers moving out of New York, there is a book out there you can find called Red Smith on Baseball. And he talks about it in the most literate of ways of that evolution. Two teams beloved in New York, especially the Dodgers, hitting the road. Where the Dodgers sort of dissembled a little bit and said things like the Dodgers will always be in Brooklyn, which was a lie. And then, Horace Stoneham, who owned the Giants, was a little more forthcoming about all of that. But they left for California, and the Mets came into being. And it took a little doing by a man named Bill Shea, who for a long, long time was the name on the stadium we played in. That, of course, is no longer there. It's Citi Field now. But that history is all, to me, it's people. It's not words on a page. And that's what's really neat about it.
Yeah, and then, of course, the expansion draft, a lot of the players that were on that original Mets team in '62 were former Giants, Dodgers, Gil Hodges, Snyder. There was that influx of those attractions that would draw those Dodgers fans back to then follow and become avid Met fans. And around that time, you were playing ball. You had you started taking baseball, I guess, a little bit more seriously, and you did some type of tournament, and I believe in the Baltimore area. And this was
I
this
played
was
in
the catalyst of getting signed.
I played in the Johnstown tournament, which was a really, really quality amateur tournament, and I played on a pretty good team in Baltimore. Back then it was called Leone's Boys Club. Leone's brothers, I think, owned a couple of filling stations or gas stations, repair, stations. And they were the guys who sponsored the team. And we went to the final game against the guy, the Brooklyn team, in the final game, and lost. But I had a really terrific series in Point Stadium in Johnstown. Hit a bunch of balls over a very close fence in left field, and just had a good time. And I figured, my plans were to go back to the University of Maryland and pursue my physical education degree. I'm thinking of, becoming a PE teacher, and then the Mets. Walked into my house, the head scout, Pete Gebrian, walked in with a piece of paper that had a number on it. He said, I'm not a business person. He said that number might not be there tomorrow. When I looked at it, it was $35,000 to sign a contract. My mom and dad were, making maybe 12,500 together between them. And when I saw $35,000, my first thought was the most dangerous place for you might be between me and that piece of paper you want me to sign, because I'm getting there. You know, if you want, if you don't want to get run over, you best move out the way. And that was how it went down. And I signed with them. And the big
Wow.
sell then was, the Mets need talent. If you sign with them, everybody was a free agent back then. That was before the draft.
Mhm.
In 1963, it really was, and I bought the idea. I never regretted it, and it did work out that way. I played 1 year of minor league baseball, and 1965, I'm in the big leagues playing for Casey Stengel. How about that?
That's amazing, as we'll use many times during this
To coin an
interview.
expression, yeah.
Yeah, the team, as you said, was managed by Casey, one of the all-time great managers and one of the all-time great characters in the game. Uh, about that journey,
Completely authentic. I mean, we were talking about it. I talked to a group of guys here in New Orleans where I live the other day, and we were talking about. I said, think about in this notion of you know uh, uh, it- degrees of separation, right, from things in your life. When I played for Casey Stengel, I played for a guy who came to the big leagues with Brooklyn, and I don't know if it was the Dodgers in 1912. I think it was the Brooklyn Robins or something like that. And Casey was an outfielder who, came up, and he was like 20, 21 years old. And I never was aware of too much of that. I knew he had played there. I knew he had played in Brooklyn and started in Brooklyn, but when I was young as a ball player, I didn't delve into all of that. There wasn't the internet back then. It wasn't as easy to retrieve all that information. But over the years, I've familiarized myself with it. And Casey Stengel was this guy that came to the big leagues in 1912. In 1916, played in a World Series against the Boston Red Sox, and there was a left-handed pitcher there from Baltimore who pitched not just a complete game. He pitched 10 or 11 innings, drove in a couple of runs, named Babe Ruth, and they won the World Series. But Casey was in the 1916 World Series. You start thinking back to when people played baseball in the age before penicillin. Those were real men.
yeah, absolutely. And Casey certainly was one of them and a character. I mean, what did it mean for you? I mean, a guy like Casey Stengel, and that was his last season. He broke his hip and then was forced to retire.
Yeah,
But
he
having that association with you that year, where the youth of America, as he coined it, started to emerge in the New York Mets organization. Talk to us about that personal relationship you had with Casey and any stories that come to mind.
Well, Casey was a legend walking around in the flesh. Okay, when you start thinking about his time with the New York Yankees and all of those, World Series and World Series one, and with the Yankees in the late '40s, early and through the '50s, they Yankees, for everything he did for them. In 1960, they fired him for being 70 years old, and they made no bones about it. They said, you can't be this old and manage in the big leagues. And the Mets, of course, scooped Casey right up. And I remember the line from the press conference when Stengel was announced as the New York Mets' first manager. He said, in that voice he had, was a kind of gravelly voice, and he said, "Yeah, the Yankees fired me for being 70 years old." He said, "But I'm here to tell you, I won't make that mistake again." He was
He
brilliant. He
Yeah,
was
he had the
brilliant.
press wrapped around his
Stingley to me
finger.
was
They
brilliant.
loved him, and he was brilliant. And when I look at old films today, and just Stengelese and the things that he said and everything that he did, and it was a magical time. I mean, for the Mets transitioning from the veterans that were in the expansion draft and then the youth of America. I mean, you hit in your rookie year. I mean, 19 home runs in that rookie year, and it was a record that was held by you until Strawberry broke it in '83 with
Well,
26
I hit
home.
15 of those home runs in the first half of the season playing for Casey. I never hit
Yeah,
15 home runs playing for anybody because Casey put me in the lineup and just let me go. He said,
yeah,
"You're not going to learn how to hit these guys sitting on the bench." So I had gotten a few base hits. My second at bat in the big leagues was a home run off of Turk Farrell um,
wow,
with the Astros, and I hit a ball over the back wall in Shea. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. My ignorance of baseball was epic back then. I was just enthusiasm and energy. When you're 20, 21 years old, you're never tired. You're always ready to go, and I got a chance to play, and I was a pretty good fastball hitter back then. Didn't know why. Well, didn't know anything about a swing. I just loaded up and let her fly, and I hit a bunch of home runs. Next thing you know, I'm playing a little bit, and I don't know how to play baseball at that level. I don't. I mean, there's so many different elements of the game that I was completely ignorant of. But who'd we have? And so I got to play, and I had a pretty good first half. But started seeing those sliders coming up there, and that changed my tune a little bit.
yeah, and the pitching was incredible, I'm sure. Uh, the influx of youth that was starting to emerge in
Oh
'65,
yeah,
even
yeah,
Buddy Harrelson, Tug
yep.
McGraw, Cleon Jones, they debuted in '65, and
Oh,
uh,
Nolan Ryan was on that team still. Not on that team, but he was in the organization.
yeah,
Tim
'66 he came up.
McAndrew, uh, Gary Gentry. I mean, Kuzman would show up. Jerry Kuzman would show up. I mean, we were loaded with pitching in that early Mets organization, loaded with pitching, and that was a triumph of our scouting system,
Yeah,
and them. Going for the most difficult element was good arms, and they had done an amazing job of collecting good young arms.
yeah, and of course Tom Seaver made his debut in '67, and it had to be just wonderful to see the youth come in and as the older guys were
Well, the
starting to
best
be.
arm ever in the organization was essentially an accident.
Yes.
Seaver should have been signed by the Braves,
Yep.
but they waited too long in the negotiations, and Seaver was signed up for classes at USC, and so you couldn't sign him. He couldn't report to them because he had already gone to class at USC, and they screwed it up completely. And the Mets, in a draw out of a hat with a couple of other teams, we end up with Tom Seaver, the best arm we ever had in the organization, period. By chance to go with all
Yeah.
those other pretty good arms.
Yeah, by picking his name out of a hat, they get the best pitcher in the franchise's history to this day. So this new breed is coming in, but it really is not till 1968 when Gil Hodges took the helm over his manager when things really began to make progress. And talk to us about Gil and what was he like compared to Casey, and then of course Wes Westrom, who skippered the team after Casey left and stayed there until the end of '67, I guess, and he left, and Salty Parker came in for a
Well,
week or so.
those guys that followed Casey Stengel were just, to me, they were just placeholders.
Yeah,
and the organization hadn't matured to any point yet where, where a manager could make any difference. But they managed to get Hodges back from the Washington Senators. They traded a pitcher for him.
Bill Dennehy, I think.
Bill Dennehy went.
Yeah.
Bill Dennehy, who was a friend of mine, went to Washington, and that allowed the Mets to negotiate with Hodges. When Hodges showed up, here's a guy who was, a Marine from, World War II. All right. He was in the Marine Corps. I found out later on that Gil was also, my father in World War II was a right rear gunner in a B-29, the biggest bomber that we had. And my dad was stationed on Tinian in the Marianas from 1944, early 44 through the end of the war. Hodges was on Tinian with the Marines, and they were staging for the invasion of Okinawa. And Hodges was with an anti-aircraft group in the Marines, but Hodges went to Okinawa, and anybody reads any history of that series of battles in World War II, it was grim and awful. And there was a point somewhere along the way where Tom Seaver, who was actually in the Marine Corps Reserves, a lot of guys on our team back in 68, 69 were in the reserves because if you were in the reserves, you probably wouldn't end up in Vietnam, and that was the out. But you had to go to meetings and 2 weeks of summer camp, and Nolan Ryan was in a reserve group. Kenny Boswell from the 69 team was. Buddy Harrelson in 68, 69 was in a reserve group.
Yeah, I remember. I actually remember when guys were actually off the team for a week or two to.
It's interesting, yes, because Buddy tried to go to meetings in 68, in the morning early, and then come out and play ball at night, and then go back real early in the morning for 2 weeks, and it just wore him down. In 1969, they had Al Weiss on the team, and Al Weiss was a guy who could play shortstop, second base, and really was a great get from the White Sox organization. And they just let Buddy go to his 2 weeks of summer camp and forget about baseball. And I think it did him a world of good because it didn't wear him down. He did that commitment. When he came back to the team, he was ready to go. But Tom Seaver was interesting because he once asked Gil Hodges what it was like on Okinawa. And Gil Hodges' response to Tom Seaver, who was a Marine Reserve guy himself, was, Tom, if you want to know what it was like, you needed to be there. And that was it. That's how horrible it was. And everybody that knew someone who had seen the horrors of World War II understands why that generation took some prodding and some some effort to bring a lot of those stories out. Tom Brokaw and the Greatest Generation and all of that business. Hodges was in that generation, and he talked to his son one time for about 15 or 20 minutes. Gil Jr. said to me, and he sat me down, he told me what it was about, and that was the last we ever talked about it. So it wasn't a memory that Gil was looking to re-explore, and even if your name was Tom Seaver.
Yeah, it was, boy, I mean, what an influence that Hodges had in the stories and just the education that he delivered to everybody.
Oh, he was hardcore. He and I had I wasn't great with authoritarians. He was an authoritarian. It was going to be the way he wanted it to be, his way or the highway, and I really grinded against him with some of that. I felt like that was one of the failures of my career. I came back and played pretty good baseball down the stretch in 1969 after being useless pretty much for that entire season, the last month and a half or so. I played halfway decent, and when you played good, Hodges knew what to do with you. When you were playing as badly as I was playing, I didn't play much, So I did a lot of bench time, but I was my my real disappointment about myself was not having a better relationship with Gil Hodges, because all he wanted you to do was act like a grown up, get yourself in great shape, and work to make this team better. And I could do some of that some of the time, but I couldn't do all of it all of the time. And he and I didn't have the relationship I think we should have had, and that's all on me.
Well, it could be also generational in a way. It was a tumultuous time in the country, and you were a bit, I guess, you're a little bit free spirited as other young men back in the '60s.
Stupid
And
is another word you could
well,
use.
you were in your early 20s as well, so
Well, I didn't. I felt like Hodges came after I had had the best year of my career in '67, and maybe I was under the impression I knew how to get myself ready and how to prepare and what to do. And Hodges had his own way of what he wanted you to do and prepare, and some of that bothered me, and I shouldn't have let it. But that's on me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Eddie Kranepool as well because of the platoon situation, and I believe there was a time in '70 or '71 when Gil sent him down when he wasn't doing
Yeah,
well.
it
I mean,
isn't just that. It's like, look, Eddie and I did both kind of grind a little bit with Hodges, but Eddie played 18 years with that franchise. I couldn't keep my mouth shut enough to uh, make half of that.
but Ron, you were a star. Yeah, I mean, you were a star, and I'm going to reference something in
I
1968.
was a
All right, so
well-known guy.
you were a
Star.
well-known
I
guy,
don't know
and
about stars. Stars.
I'm going to pull up the cover of Sports Illustrated in 1968 in May. Marsh, if you could pull that cover up, and that was kind of a pretty big deal. I mean, Sports Illustrated was the
Nice
premier
picture,
sports
though. You got to
publication.
admit.
It was a great picture. The moving Mets with slugger
Little
Ron Swoboda.
the sideburns. The sideburns are going down. It's
Yeah, they're starting to grow out.
not
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
Not bad picture. Not bad.
So, how did that affect you when you and how did that like you're on the cover of Sports Illustrated in 1968 as a young
Some
player
people
with the
say it's a
emerging Mets
curse.
team?
If you're not good enough player, it's a little bit of a curse. Maybe you think you're better than you are, but it was an honor. It was an honor to be on the cover. I still get them. I still get them in the mail. People want me to sign them and whatnot. They're out there, still around, and
Oh yeah.
you know, um, I um, uh, I never thought it was an indignity. That's for sure.
I have my cover. I have my copy.
Well, it's like it's one of those. Yeah, it's one of those things that was cool. It was
Yeah.
cool that it happened. It didn't hurt your public relations any. And
No.
I was always somebody that was pretty approachable by fans in general and people in general. I always felt like, look, man, that this getting an opportunity to play baseball doesn't make you better than anyone. It's a different sort of way to make a living. It ain't like holding down a job at a bank. Um, it's an interesting way to make a living, and I did that, and then I was in local TV sports
Right.
for 20 years after my baseball career. So I had a very unconventional professional life, and both of them were careers that I wasn't really ready for when they blossomed. I wasn't ready to be in the big leagues in 1965, but here I was. I wasn't ready to be on television when my baseball career was over, but here I was at WCBS in New York, number
Yep.
one market in the country. I mean, it's like, duh, it's like,
Yeah.
but
I
one
remember
thing I
that.
could do is scuffle. I was
Yeah.
curious about things. I could scuffle. I could take a little kick in the butt and bounce back. And that's probably in all the things I've done in my life. I've always been resilient that way, and that's the blessing of it all.
Mhm. No, every day is a gift, and when you fall into stuff, I mean, like personally myself, I never thought I'd be doing this. After years in the music business and the pro wrestling business and all the other things that I did,
Pro wrestling. All right. There you
yeah,
go.
I
Well,
was in the ring, in the
well,
banner behind me. I had a
well, in
couple.
a lot of ways, look, there's a whole lot of people who do this sort of thing, this blog or online stuff and social media. In some ways, always thought that social media would be the blossoming of communication between us people.
Yeah.
That we had a medium now where we could get on and talk about things that mattered and speak to the truth of things. I'm sad to report that social media and online media, is really what I consider one of the worst things that's happened to our culture. Frankly, you're speaking to the truth here and asking me about things that I'm happy to talk about, but if you start thinking about our news media, and I learned a little something about the news media working at WCBS in the same building as Walter Cronkite and all those people, and how hard they worked at making sure what they reported was the truth.
Yes.
And now you got every what out there on every blog, on, and we've media is disparate now between the disparate poles of our the polarity of our political system, and it's not helping us. It's not made us better. It's not made our world better. It's made it
No.
angrier, and we don't like people. We don't like one another as much as a result of what's happened to our news system. Sorry
Yeah.
about my rant.
Well,
That's
I mean but it's very true. I mean, uh, back in the day, who was more trusted than Walter Cronkite?
nobody.
So nobody. It's changed so much. And in the year of 1969, I mean, the country was going through a lot of stuff. I mean, from the
You betcha.
Vietnam War,
You
uh,
betcha.
the kids were protesting. There was an uprising among the youth of America.
Well, think
Every
about it now. We had identity politics. You had
Yeah,
gay rights. You had women's rights. The Vietnam War was right in '68 was kind of at a peak. It started. Nixon was the incoming president in 1969,
yeah,
and you had all of those demonstrations and protests around all of that stuff. Civil rights itself, with Dr. Martin Luther King murdered in
yeah.
'68, Bobby Kennedy murdered in '68. I thought, where you had a chance to maybe solve a few problems, somebody turned a gun on some people that could have made a difference in 1968. And
Yeah.
I don't think things went up from there. And that
I was
was
in junior
a
high.
remarkable time. And there was plenty of money in the system back then. People
Yeah,
had money because the war was feeding industry, and people had money. But what we had a hard time was finding some sort of concord,
yeah.
agreement.
Oh, yeah,
And we
yeah.
haven't gotten back to it. We
No,
never
we
gotten
haven't. I
back to
mean,
it.
that was, 68. I mean, I was in junior high. I was in 7th grade and, from, Martin Luther King being assassinated in April, and then
Like,
everybody's hope, RFK, when he was assassinated in June, it was just kinda like, uh, the deflation of your spirit it was just kinda like we're in a place that even as a kid, as a 12-year-old or 11-year-old as I was at
sure.
the time, you lost hope on things, and then, it was like it was in '69, that's when the Mets, I mean, from everything that was going on, the turmoil, the Vietnam conflict, Woodstock took place, the Man on the Moon, which was kind of a
Well,
feel-good thing, but
we were, I think, in every way, we were a respite from
yes.
some of that discord. And how nice that we could give people in New York, the greatest city in the world, give them something to enjoy that everybody could agree on. Um, the fact that with everything else going on back in that time, that we were able to be a part of that story, of that narrative. The Mets win the World Series. And, how many people said, if Mets can win the World Series, we can get out of Vietnam. If the Mets win the World Series, we can figure out all the rest of this stuff.
Right.
You felt like you had a chance. The halfway through that season, I was a huge fan of the astronaut program, and the Apollo program was. We were in. This is great. We were in right at the halfway mark in the season. We were in Montreal, and played a good series. Played well against the Expos, and we went to get on our aircraft and come back to New Orleans. Turns out our aircraft had a broken part, and we weren't going to make it back on time. They had to do something with the aircraft. We repaired to the bar in the airport in Montreal, and that's where we watched Armstrong, take that small step for man, giant leap for mankind live on television. Me and Eddie are sitting there next to one another at Kranepool, and we kind of clicked glasses and went, "Wow, man, you believe your eyes are seeing this." And I was a huge fan of all of that because I just loved rockets and spaceship. And in 1965, we had met all of the Mercury astronauts in Houston.
Wow.
I was blown away. These guys that were all, jet fighter pilots who decided it was in their best interest to sit in this little tin can and let them shoot you up in the air, and out of space. It's like, you're a freaking pilot. You're an ace. You're our version of knights in shining armor, for God's sake. And they were. That's the way I saw them. But I just saw the drama of that, the danger of it, and these people willing to accept that danger, and went all the way, Armstrong and going all the way to the moon and back. I thought it was the greatest adventure that I, in true life that I had ever experienced. It was amazing.
It was kind of bringing the country together for that small moment, as the Mets did, because the Mets kind of became a national story after they won, and from everything that's between the Mets and the moon landing. 69, Ron, for you, of course, the memories are there, and it would be something that we have to discuss because that was the magic, right? You had a great September. Grand Slam on the 13th of September, beating the Pirates. And September 15th, Steve Carlton strikes out 19 Mets, Major League Baseball record.
That made a lot of sense
because of your two dingers.
Look, I didn't hit Steve Carlton, who's pretty good, eventually Hall of Fame left-hander. I never hit him very good to begin with. And here on this makeup game, that was a makeup game. We went to St. Louis to play one game, and Carlton pitched against us. Oddly enough, I went down. They had a batting cage in left field, and I wasn't feeling comfortable at home plate. And I went down to their batting cage, and it was one of these wheel machines, one of the early wheel machines.
Yeah.
Ralph Kiner had gotten permission from the coaches to go down there and just monkey around a little bit. I went down there, and he fed me a few baseballs, and in today's age of cybermetrics and all of the different measurements and things they have of hitting, and Ralph it was strictly visual. Like, he'd feed me a ball, boom, he'd say, "That looked good. How'd that feel? That looks good. How's your stance? Get your hand back a little more. Yeah, okay. That looks good. Feed me a ball, boom. How'd that feel?" It was that sort of, exchange. And I don't know if it was the extra batting practice or what, but I started feeling pretty good. And I went into a ball game where I thought, you face Steve Carlton, he's got pretty good stuff. And, he had excellent stuff that night. And what do? I hit a fastball home run the second time up after he struck me out. We're down 1-0. I hit a 2-run home run. We go up 2-1 off a fastball in the left field. They go up 3-2. He strikes me out again. And he throws me the last time up with a runner aboard. He throws me a slider down and in. And somehow I get to it. And I had a line drive over the left field fence for two-run home runs. Both home runs were hit with 2 strikes on me, and I struck out twice, and he's striking out 19 guys. You tell me how that makes any sense. And we win, and we needed that game. And we win and walk out of there with like, man, we're on our way. So it was extraordinary, to say the least.
Yeah, the Mets were certainly on a roll at that time. That month of September will never be forgotten. September 24th, you clinch and then get into the playoffs.
Think about this, John. We, in the last 6 weeks of the season, we won 3 out of every 4 games we played. The Cubs had a 6-game lead, and we were relevant at that point into August. The end of August, something happened. They were a 4-man pitching staff. They had one guy, and Phil Reagan was their bullpen. None of the Mets coaching staff thought much of the Cubs and Leo DeRocher. They knew him from way back when with the Giants and Dodgers contest. Nobody on the Mets thought a lot about Leo DeRocher. And DeRocher, who was, thought he invented baseball, and there was every bit of the enmity between our coaching staff and Leo was palpable, and it was so interesting that because I always thought about this thing. Leo was dating starlets, when Hodges was on Okinawa. And you talk about a man. Hodges was a man, and Leo was an image of himself. And Hodges was the best baseball mind I was ever around. That includes Gene Mock. And for us, we put it together. Seaver and Kuzman were ridiculous in the second half of that season. And behind those 2 guys and everybody else on that pitching staff, we went on a 3 out of 4 is 750 baseball down the stretch the last 6 weeks. The Cubs never knew what hit them. Once they hit that skid, we went by them like a guy, changing a tire on the side of the road and never looked back.
Yeah, it was incredible to watch. I'll never forget that night, 9:07, September 24th, the double play, and that was it. And then the postseason starts, and you guys sweep the Braves in the first NL Championship Series ever. Unfortunately, you didn't see any action because of the platoon situation.
Yeah.
And then you wind up playing every game in the World Series, I believe.
Not every game. Jim Palmer was the right-hander who pitched, but they had 2 left-handers. Mike Cuellar and
McNally.
Right?
Yeah.
McNally. And thank you. So I got to see those left-handers, and I didn't start out very strong in the World Series because I didn't play at all against the Braves in the league championship. But Hodges was still platooning, and I got her going a little bit and ended up getting 6 base hits in the whole World.
You hit 400 in the World Series. I mean,
in that segmented, slice of the season, I got a little hot and end up driving in the go-ahead run in the
Game 5.
Game 5, the clincher for us, and that always made me feel good because Hodges let me hit against a right-hander, sidearm and right-hander. He let me go up there because I was swinging about good. If you played good, you played.
Yep. Yeah, that was amazing. That's, the 2 clips that we have, Ron, of course, these are, embedded in history. We couldn't do a show with you without showing everybody the catch. So I'd like to pull that up right now. And then we also pulled a clip of your game-winning hit in that Game 5 World Series. So, Marsh, if we can play the catch first, and then we'll talk about it with Ron.
One down. Fly ball to tie it up for the Orioles. Nancy Seaver. Robinson has not had the ball out of the infield. Grounded to short, fouled out, grounded to third. Straight away for him in the outfield. And there's a drive to right center. Swoboda comes up with it. The tag to third. Here comes Frank Robinson. The game is tied. Ron Swoboda making another sensational catch for the Mets. Frank Robinson, the old veteran, they're going to appeal a third that Robinson left too quickly. But Frank Robinson, here's a grab. Look at that, Lindsay.
Beautiful catch by Ron Swoboda. And now the Mets.
Wow.
Amazing.
Don Clendenin said I was, stupid for trying for it. And it's true that when you lay out like that for a ball, the degree of difficulty goes straight up. And the thing was, I made a pretty good jump on the ball. I didn't know what else to do. I mean, looking back over it over all these years, I in my mind, I can't see a safe route. I can't see peeling back or veering off the line I was on. And I had taken so many line drives and ground balls from Eddie Yost, our third base coach, worked me out as an outfielder. And I had a little routine with him. He sometimes hated to see me showing up because he would, I'd want him to hit me a bunch of line drives and ground balls. I wanted to make myself a better outfielder, and I did. And I was better than conventional wisdom had me as an outfielder, which, I've always maintained. Conventional wisdom is conventional, but it's not always wisdom. And I was better than people's notions of me. Was I as good as that catch? No. It's like that Browning poem about, a man, you need to, exceed your reach, or what is a heaven for? I did exceed my reach with that, but I came up with it. And, I think the work I had put in on getting good jumps on the ball was the only thing got me there.
It was incredible. And I have to share a personal story with you about that game. I had been dealing with my mom, who had been ill. She was going through some illness in September and was eventually hospitalized for that. And so it was really traumatic in a way. But the day of that game, Game 4, my dad was home from work, and my aunt was there watching us as well. And he told my aunt, tell Johnny to stay home today. He's not going to school. So I go into the bedroom, and I was like, he goes, you're not going to school today? I was like, I'm not going to school. He goes, no, because you're going to the World Series. And that was game.
Wow.
And I'm getting goosebumps right now. So I got to see Game 4 sitting in the mezzanine. I got to see the catch. I got to see Seaver. I got to see the winning run with the bunt single, but that catch and Ron, I got goosebumps. But that was kind of a day in my life that I'll never forget. And the fact that I was able to be there in person to see that in 1969 in Game 4 of that World Series.
Well, that's what we share, as players lucky enough to be around then. And you know what? Lucky enough to still be around. That's what we share with the fans that paid money to be there. We were getting paid to be there.
Yeah.
But we all really experienced the same sort of feelings, that we were involved in something bigger than all of us and special on a level that is hard to duplicate.
Yes. Yeah. And, the ironic thing, too, was the very next day, of course, it's Game 5. And I wake up and I go into my dad's bedroom and knock on the door. And I was like, Dad, can I stay home from school today? It's the Mets could win the World Series. He goes, you're going to school. So I'm like, please let me stay home today. Because the Gallaghers next door, they stayed home from school because it was like, that they
Right.
were such diehard Met fans. So I wound up listening to Game 5 in class in 8th grade in science class to hear the end of it. And at
Well,
3:16
that's back,
p.m.,
it was all day ball back then.
it
So it
was.
intruded on your life if you let
But I was like, I was at the World Series the day before, but here it is, the day the Mets are winning the World Series. I'm in school listening.
Yeah.
And then at 3:16, when Jones made the catch, my science teacher was like, shut off the radios. It's over. The game's over. Shut it off. And that was like so disappointing, but I at least I got to go to Game 4.
Well,
I know we've kept it for a while. I got just a few more things, and we'll wrap it up. I do want to go to that game-winning hit for one, and then I want to talk to you about Eddie Kranepool on the other side before we wrap it up. So, Marsh, if we could play Ron's game-winning hit in Game 5 of the World Series when the Mets won the whole damn thing.
Breaking pitch is hit in the air down the left field line. Buford is racing over, and he can't get it. He short-hopped it. Jones is coming home. There'll be no play at the plate. He scores, and Swoboda goes to second on the throw. The Mets are leading by a score of 4-3. Ron Swoboda. Look at it again now. Watch Don Buford.
Buford gives us a real try, but can't get to it. Traps it, and desperately throws the ball in on the throw to the plate. Here's the swing by Ron Swoboda, who comes up with his second hit of the game. Right in there to him. But the Mets have scored 2 in the 6th, 1 in the 7th, and now have gone ahead with 1 in the 8th.
that would be your classic hanging slider. Yeah, I was glad I got a little piece of it. I wouldn't call that a classic swing. I hit it off the end of the bat, and Don Buford really, if he laid out like I laid out, he catches the ball on the fly. But he wasn't a very good outfielder, and played it on a hop. I think a lot of other left fielders would have caught it, but that wasn't how it went down that day.
Well, it was the game that won it all for the Mets, and how wonderful is that to have the hit that drove in the game
Oh yeah,
winning run. Even though they scored one more run, it was 5-3, but that was it. But as we begin to wrap it up, Ron, and I want to thank you for your time. I do want to just touch upon a couple other things. One of which is Eddie Kranepool.
yep,
And your relationship. You said you were friends, teammates for 6 years, friends for 60. Tell us
yep.
about that relationship with Eddie.
Eddie and I were very different people. He was a little more conservative than I was. Probably voted for Trump, but we never let that disparity interrupt the relationship that really mattered. Eddie went through some tough times, and here's the thing I remember about Eddie when he was struggling, and he needed a kidney transplant. He had to literally create the process that allowed someone that informed someone that they could donate a kidney to Ed Kranepool, because at his age, in his 70s, he wasn't going to get one through the normal procedure, getting on a list and waiting. That wasn't going to happen at his age. So he had engaged in an informational campaign in New York and got a person to donate him a kidney, which he badly needed. He hadn't gotten as far as needing to be on a kidney machine, dialysis, but he was getting there. And I saw him here. He had a stepdaughter that went to Tulane University here in New Orleans, and he came down to kind of help her get settled in. And he could barely walk a block without sitting down, but you never heard him complain. He never complained about it. And, and the other miracle of that whole process is the surgeon who was going to do the procedure for Eddie had another patient whose matchup with Eddie was better than the donated kidney, and the donated kidney to Ed Kranepool was a better match for this other person. So they did this little switch,
Hmm.
and it was to the betterment of both people. Eddie's life, his quality of life went straight up. The I think he was a former New York City cop who got the other kidney, is doing very well. And last time I saw him was at Eddie's funeral, in New York, and it was a sadness because people that knew Ed Kranepool knew that this guy had to go through some stuff, but you never heard him whimper or complain, and it was the guy that I knew, straight down the line. So we were always good friends, and nothing got in the way of that.
Yep. I have my picture of Eddie Kranepool, the painting in back of me, and I lived and died with every Ed Mac throughout his entire career. And
Oh,
I
you
met
think
him a
about
few
a guy that went through as many general managers and managers in the Mets organization and kept making himself relevant. 18 years in the big leagues. I think that's amazing. That tells you he could come off the bench and play. He understood the game. He was a guy that really should have become a general manager in somebody's organization, and it should have been the Mets. But those things just couldn't work out under the ownership around that time, and that was a shame because Eddie had a lot to bring to the game of baseball beyond being a player and a former player.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get to the ownership of today, but I do want to just share one more personal story with you, and it involves you and Eddie. Uh, Back in the day, I opened up the newspaper, Newsday, on Long Island. I lived in Babylon, and
Yep.
there was a restaurant opening in Amityville.
Yeah.
So, Marsh, if you could pull up that newspaper ad, and it actually, when I saw
There they
that in
are.
the newspaper, I almost had a heart attack.
There's a busy ad, isn't it? That's what they would call a busy ad.
There's a lot on there: the businessman lunch,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
happy hour,
yeah,
the
yeah.
Dugout Express. But it was a restaurant in the next town over from where I lived that had my two favorite players as
Right,
partners in it.
right.
And I begged my dad, and my mom was better again, and please, you got to go to the dugout. And I thought you guys would be hanging out in there like every
We
single
spent a
day.
lot of time there, and I can
Yes,
tell
you
you
did,
this.
but
I knew nothing about the restaurant business before we opened that place, and I didn't learn a whole lot about the restaurant business. The only thing I know at the end of all that time, I spent a lot of hours in there, and um, 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 the only good news was I didn't lose any money. I lost a lot of time, but it
yeah.
was an interesting experiment. I didn't know anything about it, and it's a tough business to just parachute in. But like I said, I didn't lose. I didn't lose any
No,
money, so
it's a
just a lot of time.
tough business for anyone, no matter who you are.
Oh yeah,
Restaurants.
the irony is I had two sons who went to college and screwed up their college out of high school and ended up in the restaurant business. They both worked in the kitchen as chefs. And my youngest son was trained as a chef, and my oldest son, who unfortunately passed away, he started out, worked his way into kitchens, and learned about it, seat of the pants. So they both worked in the business, and that was well after I was done with the dugout and whatnot.
But for as a young kid, as a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, to see that, and it was just it blew my mind because you guys are my favorite players, and I have so many
Yeah,
great memories, Ron. And
Well, we met a lot of
uh,
people there, but it was,
oh yeah,
yeah, it was something that, I don't know what we thought we were going to do, but
yeah.
like I said, the good news was I didn't lose any money.
Well, that's the good news.
Yeah.
I do want to wrap it up with you today. I mean, when we talked on the phone, and I saw you at spring
You mean for
training.
that half hour you wanted to talk to me on?
Yeah, look at that. I know. It's been
My
amazing,
pleasure, man. It was
but
a pleasure, John. I enjoyed it.
you do follow the team today, and
I
the
do.
last question I have for you is the ownership with Steve Cohen has made it more of a priority now for the alumnus of the New York Mets and the history of the New York Mets and the things that he's done. Eddie Kranepool patch this year on everybody's uniform. Talk to us about the Cohen regime and the alumnus of the Mets, and what you see has happened to the Mets organization since this man took over and has now put an emphasis on history and alumni.
Well, I think he's put an emphasis on players. They did the Soto deal, and while some people might feel like Soto's struggling to be worth the kind of money they put out for him and the money they're going to have to pay, Soto in that in that lineup, I think is part of the reason that Pete Alonso is having such a great start. He's he is the most relaxed I've ever seen him as a player and
I
getting
agree.
quality at bats. And they're not hitting the ball like they can. They're not picking up runners in scoring position like I
Right.
think they can. But
Mhm.
I think the pitching has been a real surprise. The bullpen now is not locked. Is not locked on Diaz. If he's not going to be up to closing, I think they got some guys that can fill in there. Diaz is going to be okay. I think he is not the 100-mile-an-hour guy that we remember from years ago, but they got a few guys coming out of the pen and a few starting pitchers that can get them there. And I think the hitting will pick up when McNeil gets back in there, and Nimmo has left more people on base than you can count, um, uh, because he hadn't been off to much of a start. I don't know what's going to go down with Beatty, but uh, it struck me as kind of interesting. He's wearing number 7, and he's got the 7 patch on him.
I know.
I'll tell you what, he's going to be finding himself in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
I think because you need way more performance than they're getting from him, and he's a great kid, but he ain't doing it. And
Mm.
I think that all reflects Steve Cohen, who, as you mentioned, seems to have a sense of history, and he has certainly embraced a bunch of us guys from the way back when, and it's all to our betterment. I'm a Met fan from the get go, but I like I'm complimented by the idea that Steve Cohen knows who we are. He knows about our career. He was a Mets fan before all this and before all that money came into his life, and so
Yeah.
he's putting his money where his mouth is, and I couldn't be happier with that whole process. It's a tough run in Major League Baseball these days, but the Mets are, without doing a whole lot of spectacular things, they're playing all right. To me, I think the best of what they can do is yet to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, the pitching has carried them, of course, and the hitting hasn't really got hot yet, but I'm happy where
No,
they
you're
are
going to
at
get
this point in
Alvarez
the
back,
season.
and the two guys that are filling in for Alvarez, Turrence and Sanger, to me are doing a
Yeah,
fine job back there.
yeah,
I think you get Alvarez's bat in the lineup, you might get a little more boom. You get
yep,
McNeil in there. If McNeil's going to act like McNeil, not the guy
yeah,
last year for a long time who
yeah,
was among the missing. You need guys to kind of coalesce around one another. You get a little more talent in that lineup, and you'd be surprised. More interesting stuff will happen because that's what it comes from. Good hitters getting opportunities with men on base.
Yes, it would be great to have another parade at the end of the year. Hopefully,
I
it
would
really
love
would.
that. I would
Well,
love that.
Ron, I want to
Cool.
thank you for your time. I kept you longer than I said I would. I couldn't stop, and it was an amazing experience for me. It was an
Well, the
honor once
battery
again.
on my iPad here is running a little low, so your timing is good.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ron Swoboda. It's
Cool.
been my honor to speak to you today.
You're welcome, John. My pleasure, buddy.
That was so enjoyable for me to talk to Ron Swoboda. As I said, he was one of my heroes growing up, and what great stories about Casey Stengel and Gil Hodges in the '69 series and Eddie Kranepool. It was truly an honor to talk to Ron Swoboda, and we'll be bringing on other Met legends in future episodes during this season. We want to tell you about Tunnel to Towers now. We're very excited to let you know that David Wright has joined the Tunnel to Towers team. The former Mets captain is supporting the foundation, and we'll be hearing from David Wright in the coming weeks, and he'll be featured in a new PSA for T2T. If you're in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, listen up. The Tunnel to Towers Charlotte Stair Climb is at a new location. This year, you could climb inside Bank of America Stadium. That's where the NFL Panthers play. How cool is that? That's coming up on April 27th. And this year's event is expected to be more poignant than usual. The Charlotte Climb will honor 4 enforcement officers killed in the line of duty last April. The families will be there to honor their memories. The foundation changed their lives by providing them with mortgage-free homes. Again, the Charlotte Stair Climb is April the 27th, and once again, that's at the Bank of America Stadium. And over the coming weeks, Tunnel to Towers will be dedicating more mortgage-free smart homes, this time the 3 American heroes. They are first responders and service members who gave their bodies for their country and community. The homes are in Tennessee, Florida, and Kentucky. T2T provides these specially adapted smart homes across the country. This will provide a measure of independence and financial freedom for them and their families. We will return with Terry Collins and look at the April 2015 New York Mets. But first, we are proud to be able to debut on this episode, for the first time anywhere, a message on behalf of Tunnel to Towers from Mets Hall of Famer number 18, Darryl Strawberry.
Hey, this is Darryl Strawberry, former New York Mets. Please join me in supporting Tunnel to Towers. There are people that put on a uniform like us to play baseball game. First responders put on a uniform. You never know if they're going to come back home. They're the real heroes, I think it's important for us as citizens of this country to support them as much as possible. Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Let us do good.
Terry, I know 2015, 10 years ago, it was an amazing season for the New York Mets. And as we discussed, we're going to have a bit of a deep dive into that season on a monthly basis. And we're going to cover the month of April today. And it's Tears of Joy, a 10-year anniversary of the 2015 nationally champion New York Mets. So welcome to the analysis of April.
Yeah, I mean, this is when it all started for us in 2015. And, it's always been a special month. It's the first month of every baseball season is always for me, it's kind of like the breaking out of spring and the winter's over. And so it's a great month to talk baseball.
Well, it certainly did. April set the stage. It was an amazing, it was a month that was filled with great highlights and some injuries. I mean, it really was a crazy month to begin the season. You started the season with a 13-3 record, an 11-game winning streak. It really set the stage for the National League Championship run under your leadership with the team. And we're going to just go over some of the highlights of that. And the first highlight is opening day. The Mets have always been great on opening day, and this was no exception. You beat the Nationals 3-1 to open the season at 1-0. Highlights of that game, Terry: Bartolo Colon outdo Max Scherzer in that opener, and it was Scherzer's first start with the Nationals. His debut, he allowed 1 run over 6 innings, and then Lucas Duda had a 2-run single in the 6th and broke a no-hit bid, and that was it. It sealed the win against Washington that opening day. What do you remember about it?
Well, the biggest thing I remember is the fact that, when you're getting ready for opening day, you've got to decide who the pitcher is going to be. And I've always wanted to, reward certain guys for what they've done the year before, not necessarily what they are in spring training. But, Bartolo the year before, just, we couldn't have. He's such a professional. He made such a difference in our clubhouse with some of our Latin players. As the godfather for our Latin contingent in our clubhouse, and I really felt he's the guy who deserved to have that opening here at home in New York. And so, we sent him out there, and of course he did what he always does. Pounded the strike zone and made the game move along fast, and didn't beat himself, which he always did.
Yeah, that he's just such a legend to this day. And of course, what a big presence and what a big part of that team he was. Also, there was another highlight. Matt Harvey returned from Tommy John surgery, I believe, and he had a start which electrified the fans, 6 shutout innings. This was on April the 9th. The Mets beat the Nationals 6-3. And Travis d'Arnaud hit a 3-1 homer in the 7th, and that clinched the series win. So, how happy were you guys to see Harvey come back and make that start?
We were absolutely thrilled to have Matt on. When Matt got hurt, he was on the brink of, being arguably the best pitcher in baseball at the time, and to lose him to injury, and you never know how anybody's going to bounce back. It's, everybody thinks that Tommy Johns are easy. They're not. And it takes a tremendous work ethic to come back as fast as Matt did, and to be able to pitch as effective as he did right out of the gate. So to have him back in that mound, man, I will tell you, John, every 5th day when I would leave my apartment and drive to the ballpark, when I knew Matt Harvey was on the mound, I knew we had a chance to win. That our chances of winning that game were great. So it was good to have him back. And obviously, Travis was starting to establish himself as, truly an offensive-minded catcher. We all knew that, we all thought he was going to hit, but, he was going to start showing the power that everybody knew he had.
Yeah, he certainly did come into his own. Also on April the 12th, Jacob deGrom pitch, highlighted by 5 innings, 3 earned runs given up. And Curtis Granderson had a 9th inning single, drove in the go-ahead run. So Curtis was also a big part of that team. And you guys on April 12th beat the Braves 4-3.
Yeah,
then you head back home.
Yeah, you're talking about great names. I mean, that's why we were where we were. You've just already mentioned 3 of the starting pitchers of the 5 we had were dominating. And certainly, that's what made that summer so fun, was to watch that young pitching staff. And I don't mean, and I'm putting Bartolo in that class because no matter how old he was, he still pitched like a young man. So it certainly made that fun, that whole summer enjoyable to go to the ballpark every day.
Yeah, on April 13th, the home opener at Citi Field, Harvey dominated 8 innings, 5-hit ball, but Daniel Murphy drove in several runs that day, and Juan Lagares as well, for a wonderful win against the Phillies. On April the 14th, this was a tough one. Even though the Mets won against the Phillies 6-5, John Neese won 5 innings, and the Mets rallied late, but David Wright injured his hamstring, stealing second base on this day, and exited early. Wilmer Flores hit a 7th inning home run to secure the victory. But how difficult was it for you to see David go down that day?
Yeah, the one thing David prided himself in, he didn't get hurt much. I mean, he never went to training room. And he's such a guy that prepared himself for every game. It just tells you just never know, what's going to happen on the field. And, at that particular moment, when you lose probably easily the most important person in your lineup, it kind of shakes you up as a team and as a manager. So, but the one thing we had to do is we had to find a replacement. And you just mentioned a name, Wilmer Flores stepped up and became the guy, and became a guy that was an offensive threat for us.
Yeah, and on April the 15th, David was put on the IL. The Mets won. They beat the Phillies again, 6-1. Cologne threw 6 innings of 1-run ball. And then another one of your leaders, Michael Kadire. He hit a 3-run home run that capped a sweep against the Phillies. But you're in the middle of a big winning streak, but David was put on the IL. And Kadire's presence on that team as a leader, you've always spoke about how important he was to the team.
Yeah, he was a huge part of it. And again, coming from where he came, the organization he came from when he came over, this guy was one of the most renowned players in the American League. And even though back then we didn't have a lot of exposure to Michael, everybody knew about him and his importance in that clubhouse and his leadership on the field. And again, another guy that when he took the field, people had to play up to his level and his energy level, which I thought was a big impact on our club.
Yeah, he certainly did, and you talked about him often here, how important Kadire was. As you continue this amazing run in April, April the 18th, the Mets win again, now have a 9-3 record, but it was another tough win because of some injuries. Travis d'Arnaud broke his hand. Jerry Blevins gets hit with a line drive. So once again, you're in this amazing winning streak in the month of April, probably the best winning streak the Mets ever had in April, and you lost 2 more guys. So you must be like happy in one way, like, what's going on around here?
Yeah, that's John. You and I've talked about this. There's no good days really a lot for a manager. Jim Leland and I used to talk about. It seems like a manager always has a tough day. Even if you win, you lose players to injury. You may have to pinch hit for a guy you don't want to, or take a pitcher out of the game. There's always somebody that's upset. But when you start losing talents and players, the one thing you find out real fast in the big leagues, nobody feels sorry for you. And so, you've just got to, again, turn the page and get to the next guy, and hopefully they step up and fill that role, which our guys did during that summer.
Yeah, you always said you can't worry about the guys that aren't here. You got to worry about the guys are here.
That's
right. The Mets continued to run. They go on a 11-game winning streak, tying the 86 Mets. And more important than that was a 10-game homestand where you didn't lose. It was 10 games, winning all of them, and that really has not ever happened since then. Mets almost did it this year, but it just didn't happen. Then you lose the first game. That winning streak stops at Yankee Stadium, of all places, on April the 24th, where the Yankees beat the Mets 6-1. And that was a game where Jake didn't do so well. For him, 3 earned runs sometimes is a lot, right, for Jake. But he pitched that game. And then there was a pitcher, I guess named Michael Panada, silenced the Mets bats and it snapped the streak in the Subway Series opener. So that streak was over, but at Yankee Stadium, no less, Terry.
Yeah, hate to have that happen there. I can tell you that, John.
Absolutely. And we're getting towards the end of the month, and you come back in April the 29th, the Mets beat the Marlins in Miami, record 15-7. The end of the month, the game was postponed. So you finished off April really with a 15-7 record, which was pretty amazing. And the Mets were up, by several games over the other people in the division. And then it was a good month of April for the New York Mets in 2015.
Yeah, and I look back at now, and I kind of see a similarity with the team that's going on there right now. And you and I talk about it a lot, about getting out of the gate, man, having a good April. The fans get excited, the players are excited, and it makes going into heading into the summer very, very exciting for everybody. So we were very, very lucky. We were starting to run looking at some injuries, but again, we were in a pretty good spot going into May.
Well, May looks good too, but we're going to get to that next month. And a lot of great things happened in May, and a lot of not so great things happened in May. So we're going to try to bring somebody on that was there with you during that time. And we'll be talking about that on the next segment of Tears of Joy, a 10-year anniversary of the 2015 National League champion New York Mets. It was an amazing April for the 2015 Mets, as TC spoke about in that segment, and we will do a deep dive into the entire 2015 season, covering every single month from that World Series team on future episodes right here at the Terry Collins Show. And now it's time, as we do each and every week, we honor the amazing hero of the week. This week, we will feature Gold Star spouse Selvie Clark in honor of her fallen husband, Casey Clark. Let's go to that right now.
My name is Selvie Clark, and I am a Gold Star spouse to CIA officer and U.S. Navy Explosive Ordnance Disposal Technician, Casey Clark. What I loved about Casey was in his personality, just that he was somebody who wasn't there for the glory. We all want the credit. We all want the promotion or the raise. And Casey risked his life a lot. He's somebody who did actually 57 deployments, which is an amazing number of deployments that most people are shocked by. And he came home. He was planning to come home for Thanksgiving. By Monday, he had struck a fever, a very high fever. And we didn't know what it was, but it was presenting itself like malaria, with chills and very high fever, like 103, 104. His lungs, the pattern of inflammation was really not characteristic of COVID. It was in all four quadrants, front and back. And they started to warn us as he was not getting better. Definitely the hardest moment to have to tell a child that their father is passing away. I really am so grateful to Tunnel to Towers. It really was extremely life-changing to have your home paid for. I would have paid thousands and thousands of dollars for 20 years on that property. It is hard to articulate how much Tunnel to Towers coming into our lives has transformed us, but it absolutely transformed our whole lives. Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Let us do good.
We will have another amazing hero of the week on our next show. And before we wrap it up today, we'd like to plug a couple of appearances Terry has coming up. You know how much of a golfer he is. Well, he'll be stepping up to the tee at the Driving Impact Celebrity Golf Classic on April the 28th at the Lake Nona Golf and Country Club in the Orlando, Florida area. Terry will be there with so many ex-athletes, stars of football and other sports, and it's going to be a great event for a great charity. Don't miss your chance to share the course with a baseball great, Terry Collins. Grab your spot now by going to drivingimpactgolf.com. And for all the kids, Terry's going to be making an appearance on May the 4th up in Westchester, New York, as he attends the opening day ceremonies of the Eastchester Little League. Go to eastchesterll.org for more information. And I want to remind everybody, please subscribe to the Terry Collins Show on all podcast platforms and on our YouTube channel. It really helps us out if you go to Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to the Terry Collins Show. Click the like button, leave a review. That really helps us out. And, of course, subscribe to the Terry Collins channel on YouTube. That's youtube.com/The Terry Collins Show. We also would like you to check out this week's Amazing Conversations with Jay Horowitz, a New York Mets podcast hosted by the foremost Mets historian. I really enjoyed this week's show. Jay brings on our mutual friend, SNY's Andy Martino, about Andy's rise to being one of the foremost baseball insiders of the game. Check out Amazing Conversations with Jay Horowitz, available on all podcast platforms and also on YouTube. I want to thank the Terry Collins Show creative director, Marsh, and our researcher, Dominic DiBiase. For Terry Collins, this is John Arezzi. We'll see you next time.